must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
Viewers across the planet, thank you very much, participants of this conference world over, wherever you are across the continent of Africa. Thank you very much, those watching from China, Australia, Russia, Europe, Central Europe, Asia, South America, North America, and Canada, and on the continent of Africa. Today is a great day for us as Africans on behalf of Punchline Africa Television and on behalf of Pan-African Forum, of which I'm the chairman and founder, to present our pre-COP26 solutions, suggestions, demands to the conference that is going to take place starting from Monday, November 1st, the year of our Lord 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, today I stand here as a symbol of Africa, a symbol of hope. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, President, Your Excellency, the head of state, heads of state, and the government, Your Excellency, Her Majesty the Queen, in this great land where we are today of the United Kingdom, Your Excellencies, all ambassadors accredited to the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me a great honor as a Pan-Africanist, a man who stands for the truth on the continent of Africa, to be here in the great land of civilization. A great land of civilization where civilization began. A great land where this English that we are speaking came from. A great land that supports equality, equity across the globe. It gives me pleasure again to be the host of this pre-COP26 conference in this great city of London, on my way to Scotland, Glasgow, for the official opening of this conference, COP26. The leaders of Africa who have been invited to this conference, ladies and gentlemen, will have a huge task on their shoulders to start the debate on climate change, ecosystems, environment, and the human catastrophe that has taken place across the globe. Our stand, therefore, is a stand of many millions of Africans across the continent of Africa, ladies and gentlemen. If you agree with me or you disagree with me, the theme of this conference or this pre-COP26 conference summit that I called is, the film is Africa, part of globalization. Whatever you are in Zimbabwe, are you part of the global village? The moderators will tell you how you want to debate. Mine are opening remarks and to give my speech, which will form the basis of argument. Either you agree or disagree. The opinions will be felt, recorded, they will be delivered in Glasgow on the sidelines in the lobby groups that some of us are going to take part in. I am honored this morning to deliver this paper. Moderators Miriam and Samuel, I seek permission to deliver my paper to the world. I am on my way to Scotland to lobby for a better Africa, a better future for Africa. Across Africa, a dangerous game has been initiated by the United States of America and France, where ecosystems and the environment of Africa have been destroyed through conflicts. From Kenya, where I've spent most of my time building a redemption strategy, to Zimbabwe, where since 1998, Tony Blair's circus of regime change, which is now coming back in a format of judicial activism. I have always been a firm believer, critic of the policies of some of the Western countries, namely United States of America and France. This Pre-Cop26 summit, therefore, cannot escape the discussion of external dark forces that have destroyed the ecosystems and the environment of Africa. Before the creation and after the creation, Africa had an ecosystem. Africa had a system of environment. Our weather was the most beautiful. Our climate were the best. Our animals grew, enjoyed the fruits of God that God had given us. I want to start by stating that history will not judge me harshly for standing up for Kenya and for standing up for Zimbabwe, plus the rest of Africa, against the hegemony of the United States of America. It needs men of courage and women of courage in Africa to stand up and speak for Africa. Mwalimu Nyerere is gone, Obote is gone, Jomo Kenyatta is gone, Mandela is gone, Robert Mugabe is gone, Samora Machel is gone, Haile Selassie is gone, Governor Nasser is gone, Sekou Touré is gone. Who will speak for Africa then? The presidents of Africa who are jetting in Scotland must take note of this speech. That let history judge me, not harshly, for having warned them that we as Africans, if we don't stand firm, we might end up to be second-class citizens forever in the world of a global market. Yet we are the producers of the minerals, the resources that the West has used to build its empire in the metros. Ladies and gentlemen gentlemen on the panel and those listening across the world, this conference is a focus on some of the bad manners that the West has used against Africa as far as ecosystems and environment is concerned. For this conference, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you that I want to turn on one serious question. If you say there is globalism, if Africa is part of the globalization system, then why has America refused to remove sanctions on Zimbabwe? The sanctions in Zimbabwe are killing the ecosystems. The sanctions in Zimbabwe are destroying the environment. The sanctions in Zimbabwe are killing human beings at a rate because of lack of medicines, treatable diseases that have destroyed the future of the people of Zimbabwe. It will be very naive, therefore, for me as an African to walk straight into Scotland without returning my favor to the people of Zimbabwe, whom I have stood for since 1998, in rejection of Tony Blair tactics of imposing sanctions on this country. Sanctions kill ecosystems. Sanctions have destroyed the environment. If there is anybody in Zimbabwe who can tell me that sanctions have not affected them, their environment has not been affected, their ecosystems have not been affected because of the funding, prohibition to funding, access to funding, that person raised the first hand and threw the first stone. Today, Zimbabwe has suffered. Its ecosystems in the environment destroyed due to sanctions. Ladies and gentlemen, the people of Africa from Libya, if you look at Libya today, the ecosystem has been destroyed because of one country in Europe called France. If you look at Somalia, the ecosystem has been destroyed because of one country called United States of America in 1991 invaded Somalia, left out hurriedly, like the way they have left Afghanistan. If you look across the continent of Africa, from Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, South Sudan, Sudan, Nigeria, Cameroon, and many parts of the continent, the sanctions, the conflicts have ravaged the dream of COP26 that we are going to talk about gathering in Scotland. I will be candid, ladies and gentlemen. We cannot gather in the United Kingdom of Her Majesty's Kingdom, while the countries that actually sanctioned the people of Zimbabwe, put sanctions on Zimbabwe, destroyed the ecosystems and the environment systems of Zimbabwe, are here. It is better we tell them, for them to hear that because of those sanctions, that River Zambezi is losing water. Because of those sanctions, ecosystems in Zimbabwe are breaking down. Therefore, sanctions have killed the ecosystems. The mining companies of America, that gold mining companies, diamond mining companies, are the same ones that have destroyed the ecosystems of Zimbabwe and the rest of Africa in the countries I've mentioned. It is anti-African for Zimbabwe to continue begging the white America on how to conduct their trade and banking affairs when nobody in Zimbabwe has sanctioned America. It is anti-Africa, again, for us to sit and to sing the same song that we have been singing without looking for ways and changing the narratives of sanctions. Will Zimbabwe continue to talk about sanctions every year in and out? The answer should come from you people who will discuss whether we are in the global market or we are half citizens of the global market. Is Africa the same Africa where minerals are taken? Ladies and gentlemen, participants of this conference, Zimbabwe government must change the narrative. The narrative of begging the United States to remove illegal sanctions that they put on them must change. We must start as Africans to bust the sanctions. Why are we waiting for America? We must bust the sanctions. And I'm sure there are comrades from Zimbabwe here. I can see very many of you who will tell me why we should be begging America, yet we could have busted the sanctions. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa can bust the sanctions. Africa can trade within itself with Zimbabwe, facilitating this great country to do commerce within Africa. But why have you not done so? Fellow participants, this virtual meeting is to alert the African countries to look at whether we are in the global market. Do we belong there? Do we have NSA? Do we command the NSA? Are we part of it, or we are just spectators? I have prepared a long speech which will be found, because my minutes are running very fast. It will be found, it will be brought, which the production team should bring. We must now change the narrative, therefore. The United States can only listen to a change in the narrative, not the old format of begging them to remove sanctions. A few weeks ago, the United States of America sent an envoy into Zimbabwe to assess the damage of the ecosystems and the environment and the human catastrophe by the sanctions imposed on Zimbabweans by United States of America. It is sad that the same Zimbabweans, like Strive Masiyiwa, Jonathan Moyo, and the G40, who parade themselves internationally, and I believe I'm going to meet them in Scotland to tell them off. I'll meet Strive at least to tell him off. He cannot struggle for his own country for sanctions to be removed because he's part and parcel of the entrepreneurship that brings corruption, endless coup plotting, supported by George Soros. The notion of George Soros supporting elements who are calling for sanctions to be imposed more on the Mnangagwa regime is what we Africans will fight. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going through the main points of my speech so that I give you a chance to deliberate. You cannot be an African and start talking about ecosystems without looking at the people of Zimbabwe, the way they are suffering. The few malcontents of G40, the cabal that has coined, that has gone in bed with George Soros, have forgotten that the ecosystems and the environment of Zimbabwe must be funded in order for us to talk about climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, the panel, I have prepared this paper knowing very well what lies ahead of Africa. None of my predictions on Africa has ever come and gone wrong. The truth is that you cannot talk of globalization when one country has put obstacles of inequality on smaller states across the world. We call upon America today to allow the people of Zimbabwe to fund themselves to sell their commodities, natural resources, to do their commercial banking and exchanges in order to facilitate the rebuilding of their ecosystems. The Pre-Cop26, therefore, summit must answer the question as to why Africans have been taken as second-class citizens in their own continent and in the world. I want to touch on the question of vaccination. Across the continent of Africa, vaccines have been donated to us. All of us have the same blood, the same veins. But the vaccines that have been given to Africa are the vaccines that are remnants. Why should we agree? Why should heads of state of Africa agree to such a policy? That you treat your people first, then you start saying, take these leftovers for the people of Africa. As if we are the ones who created the disease. The disease came from China. Why hasn't the Security Council asked China what measures, what remedies can they bring on the continent of Africa on the question of COVID-19? We thank the donor countries that have given us the vaccines. Without them, we would have perished. But should we be the ones receiving the leftovers? Like when Jesus fed the people at the port of Capernaum, those who came by canoe from the other side of Galilee ate the remnants. Are we the biblical guys who ate remnants? We agree that the disease is not controllable. It is in air, but we must find out how it came about. China, for example, is a member of the United Nations Security Council. Nobody has asked China how they control their disease. Why are we not paying the price? Why are we paying the price as an African continent? That is one of the things that you people on the panel, participants of this conference, can look at. Lastly, I want to tell the world that on Zimbabwe, I want to state here with all honesty that MDC malcontents in Zimbabwe, purportedly gunning with Soros money, want to change systems under government to look like Ethiopia. The question of Jonathan Moyo, Strive Masiua, who are busy collecting donations for Africa, but at the same time planning to create havoc similar to that we see in Ethiopia and other countries, must be condemned. A regime change system is flowing, which can stop the work of President Emerson Mnangagwa, who has done very well to keep the ecosystems and the environment so far to the point where God put it to us. These African merchants, they go around Garamba Park forests in Congo. For example, we have a cable of 4,000 kilometers that is destroying the Congo forest. 4,000 kilometers of cutting the trees right from from Pacific and Indian Ocean to Atlantic Ocean. Is Masiua not destroying the environment of Africa that we have kept for a long time? Is there no other way that internet through satellite can reach Africa without destroying the forests that God put there? Ladies and gentlemen, the full speech will be got on Pan-African Forum, which you can quote, you can read, you can enjoy. I therefore declare this meeting of Pre-Cop26 wide open for discussion. Back to you, Miriam Ogutu. I don't know where she is, and Samuel Tawish in the studios in Nairobi to moderate the debate and to give conditions and guidelines on the debate. The production team in Nairobi, my speech can be distributed all over the whole world through them. I therefore declare this meeting pre-COVID-26 summit called by Pan-African Forum open and ready for discussions. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, participants. I hand it over to Miriam in the studios in Nairobi. I have done my case study was on Zimbabwe. Anybody can bring another case study. But mine in Zimbabwe, they are destroying the ecosystems. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
The sanctions, sorry, mine is the sanctions in Zimbabwe, against Zimbabwe, has destroyed eco and environmental systems of that country. Therefore, I'm calling upon the leadership, the leaders of the world as they gather in Scotland. My message, which I will deliver in the lobby, to remove sanctions so that the ecosystems of Zimbabwe, River Zambezi, and others. You read a report where River Zambezi was drying by the time it arrives on Indian Ocean shores because of the ecosystem and the environment destroyed by sanctions along the way as it comes down to Indian Ocean. I beg to move.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. David Matsanga, for that opening remark. And of course, as we all know, globalization describes the process in which national and regional economies, societies, and cultures become increasingly interconnected through a global network of trade, communication, immigration, and transportation. So we want to look at Africa in the context of the wider scope of globalization. And at this point, I'd like to bring in Saxon Svima, all the way from Zimbabwe. Saxon, it's afternoon here in Nairobi, but I know it's morning there in Zimbabwe. Welcome and give your remarks. Very well. I'm being told Saxon is not available, but he was there earlier. So I think I'd like to bring in my moderator first, Samuel Tawish, to just perhaps bring in his thoughts, and then we'll bring in Daniel Wesonga after that.
Oh, very well. Thank you so much, Miriam Ogutu at Punchline Africa TV's communication headquarters in Nairobi, and Dr. David Nyekurach Matsanga, who is the chairman of the Pan-African Forum Limited, the convener of this particular summit, COP26. Indeed, we have lined up a number of, or a host of speakers who will be making their submissions on this particular topic or summit, if you like, including, of course, Professor P.L.O. Lumumba, who will be later on making his submissions. We also have James Brathwaite from United Kingdom, Dr. Paul Clark from the UK. As Miriam, of course, did say, we also have Saxon Zima from Zimbabwe, Professor David Hoyle from the UK, Professor Jared Onyari from Kenya, Dr. Joseph Nyanchama from Kenya, and of course, we also have panelists right here who are already tuned in through our online platforms, Sharon Gitonga, Kanyi Degwa, Javan Karanja, Cornelius Omuse, Sean Wesonga, Ghana Maina, Galma Dido, Isaac, Samuel Wairegi, and of course, William Mwika. We also hope that in the long run, of course, we'll be having other panelists really coming in to make their submissions on this very important summit that we are having today. The question then we'll be asking you, is Africa part of globalization? Are we part of the global market? Are we part of the global economy? Do we matter on the platform where global issues are deliberated, or are we merely spectators as the African continent? These are matters that we would like to get submissions and views from our panelists and speakers who will be making their views as we go on with this particular conference today. Again, before I just take you back to my co-moderator, let me cue in Sean Wesonga, a journalist investigative to be particular from Nairobi, to make his remarks. Welcome, Sean Wesonga.
Yes, very, very good afternoon, Tarish Olesasina from Narok, my fellow colleague in our studios in Nairobi, Miriam Ogutu, and fellow panelists who are joining us from various parts of the continent, and of course, Dr. Matsanga David, who is in Glasgow, and also our guests who are expected to come, among them PLO, Lumumba, and many, many more other international guests. I'll start by perhaps just highlighting the question on the table, and that is actually the elephant in the room, that is Africa part of the globalization that is happening across the world, the globe? I think Africa has been on the sidelines for quite so long. Africa has been playing the second fiddle for quite so long, despite being the richest continent in the world. You know, when I remember sometimes back, there's this particular investor who was talking about the first world, the second world, and the third world. And I say that when you look at the first world, which is in America, UK, and all these other European powers, the resources there have been been exhausted. And people actually, immediately after that, you saw what happened in the Middle East, the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, the war in most parts of the Southeast Asian countries. And that was actually due to resources. That tells you that the superpowers of this world, immediately after exhausting their own resources in America and Europe, they looked at now the Middle East and the Southeast Asia. And immediately today, you realize that the same trend has actually drifted back towards the West, and that is the African continent. That tells you that Africa is a very, very rich continent. Dr. Matsanga has always talked about planes, chartered planes leaving Congo Forest, having these well-laid airports. And that these are resources which are moving from Africa. But all said and done, I believe the African continent, despite having these kind of significant of economic power and rich enrichment in terms of resources, it has not been given its fair share at the table when it comes to global matters. And even as today, the Western powers discuss about an agenda that is actually close to their own hearts, you can see the African continent has remained to be on the sidelines. When you come to the question of even issues, important issues such as global terror, you'll hear about the United States actually bringing up policies in regards to global terror. You'll hear about NATO, you'll hear about the European Union talking about maybe how to mitigate this global terrorism. But the African continent has been the biggest casualty in this. In 1998, we had the bomb blast in Nairobi. In 1998, we had a bomb blast in Dar es Salaam. Today, as we speak, we do have terror insurgency, which is happening in Cabo Delgado in Mozambique. As we speak today, most of Sahel region is actually undergoing a civil war. People are fighting against one another. And all these kinds of instabilities are not born in Africa. Most of them are instigated either by terror or by interference of foreign powers like America, Norway, France, amongst many more superpowers. So I believe, Miriam, when we're talking about issues, even as it is today in Scotland, we believe that Africa should be given space at the discussion table, because all these matters, including even climatic matters. Today, I will talk about Libya. Libya was a very, very well-faring country until NATO and other Western powers actually instituted. And today, as you can see, Libya is no longer able to sustain itself as a country, leave alone even the environmental and climatic matters that they are discussing today. So I think, Miriam, all said and done, it is very, very important that the African continent is given a space in all these global debates that are happening. And another matter, perhaps, just to add on that, the other day we were discussing about this rotational and permanent seat at the UN Security Council. That is not what Africa deserves. We deserve a permanent seat in the UN Security Council. We deserve a permanent seat in such summits where important matters regarding climatic change, where important matters regarding global economy, where matters regarding even peace and security are discussed, Miriam.
Well.
I submit.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Daniel Wesonga from Kenya, for all that. And I'll urge our participants today, if you could just keep it just below 5 minutes, that will be good, so that we allow as many people as possible to share their submissions today. So with that, I think we've been joined back, Saxon Zvina. Saxon, good. Here it's afternoon, just half an hour pressed.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Miriam. Good afternoon, panelists. How are you?
We're good. So your submission, please.
Okay. Globalization, and Africa is not proved to be part of the globalization. The reality is Africa has been on the receiving end of globalization. We've been marginalized since globalization was incepted. Our trade has dropped. Our trade contribution dropped from 4% to 1.5%. We've lost a lot of labor. We've faced immigration challenges as a result of globalization, which are detrimental to the well-being of Africa as a continent. We've lost skilled labor as a result of this globalization. And if you look at the problem with climate change, Africa didn't cause any of these climate changes. These developed world, the West, are the ones who are behind the depletion of our ozone layer. And what they're simply saying, they want us to suffer. They want to put restrictions on us so that we don't develop. They've developed already. I think they've had the issue of coal. The United Kingdom is reserves. Their power reserves is coal, but they're saying Africa don't use coal. They've developed, they've damaged the environment. Africa will be marginalized for their own benefit, so that they know the new technology of clean energy is coming from them. They've looted everything. They want Africa to go on the receiving end. Globalization was created by dominant forces to serve their specific interests. Globalization resulted in dominance of by multinational companies who are, doing the bidding for the developed world, so that Africa remains poor. I can just highlight some of the negative challenges that globalization has brought about on Africa, and which has impacted negatively even on the environment, the ecosystem. During the height of the 1945-91 Cold War, Africa also suffered because it had belonged to any of these two Western states, either the communist bloc or the Western bloc, thus losing its ability to maneuver in the international system of nations. And this is a fit likely to play out in the new emerging Cold War. Africa is on the receiving end. Africa needs to be treated as a fair partner in this war game. During there's erosion of sovereignty, especially on economic and financial matters. Is everything to do with Africa is to conform to the dictates of the IMF, World Bank, and WTO. And these are Western organizations, and they're doing the bidding. In Africa, at the end of the day, our products are forced to sell our unfinished products at a lower price, at zero price. And these guys bring in finished products. Africa won't develop. And even the production of the CFCs is done mostly by the European nations that have damaged the climate change. Globalization has not facilitated the establishment of economic conditions which are necessary for genuine democracy and governance. I think Dr. Matsanga has highlighted the issue of sanctions. I can highlight, I'm from Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe has been sanctioned, and some of they say targeted. We've had companies like Industrial Development Corporation, and this company produces food, build houses, is responsible for engineering, building buses, motor vehicles. It was sanctioned. How was that company affecting human rights? That just shows you they were just trying to protect their interests. And they talk of a clean energy when they're destroying the natural process that are supposed to companies that produce natural projects that are being sanctioned, so that we've become dependent on the West. Recently, with the rapporteur from the United Nations, she actually condemned the imposition of sanctions as they are affecting the environment, human rights, and fairness, and even the health aspect of our ordinary citizens. Africa has lost cultural identity, mostly as a result of globalization. And this has impacted on development of our children. And I think we've had problems, pornography, homosexuality, a lot of social ills has been brought about by this globalization. As it's not serving, it's mainly it has been meant to it has been forced upon us so that we surrender our sovereignty, we surrender our identity, so that we are dominated by these so-called better nations. I mean, because they claim to be better, but not standing for our rights and their own rights. They've perpetuated violation of human rights since 1945. How many nations have been bombed? From a chemistry point of view, some of the bombs that have been destroyed, the napalm that have been used, the napalm, and any bombs that have been done since 1945, they have damaged extensively the environment. Libya has been run down. Not only you're talking infrastructure, if you look at the chemicals that have been emitted in the atmosphere, they have caused carnage and damaged our environment, damaged the ozone layer, and we are paying the price for the hegemonic tendencies of the West. People, the Africans, stand up and stand tall and ask for their right to fairness. Like the song was saying, we need a permanent state, and we have got 1 billion people on the continent, and 25% of the Earth's land belongs to Africa. But what do you do in terms of decision? We are not consulted. They come up with their one-size-fits-all decisions, which are anti-Africa. We need to stand tall. We need to ask for the right play our part. Globalization produced anti-developmentalism by declaring state irrelevant. You have noticed most of these globalization has been pushed by the West through the NGOs, so that the state is not consulted. How can you divorce the state from its people? How can you divorce the state from the land, from the environment? That is a nonsense that these guys have been propagating, so that Africa remains poor, Africa remains dependent. We need to ask for a fair share. Globalization is encouraging trade in illicit in drugs, like I say, prostitution, pornography, drug trafficking, human dumping of waste, destruction of the environment, and so on. We cannot have a clean environment when we are not respecting other nations, other nationalities, other continents. Africa needs to ask for a fair share, for equality. Our leaders need to play ball, not to accept anything at the end of the day. I submit. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. That is Saxon Svina, all the way from Zimbabwe. Please, I continue to beseech the participants, please try to keep time so that we can accommodate as many people as possible. As you can see, we do have so many people waiting to share their thoughts on the topic we have today, but thank you so much for that. So at this point, I'd like to bring in there's Abigail Mupambi. Then after that, I think Cornelius Omuse, you've been there from the beginning there, so perhaps you should start getting ready. And then I think Ambassador Maina, I'll have you come in. But right now, Abigail Mupambi, also from Zimbabwe. Good afternoon, Abigail.
A very good afternoon to you, Miriam. A very good afternoon to you, colleagues. It's been a while. Well, I won't be very long on this one because my counterpart was right hitting on the nail in terms of this particular topic. But well, I'm coming to pose in a question. Is it globalization or colonization for Africa? Because the issue of this the issue of introducing globalization, if you look at the topic coming to us, it's like we are interacting at the same level, but Africa is far on the receiving end. You look at the economic globalization, look at the political side, the coming in and the introduction of democracy as the political system in Africa. We are being dominated, we are suffocating in the pretext of globalization. And this is why I am posing the question, is it globalization or colonization? At this point, probably colonization changing its shape, coping up with times. So I really feel that economically, you realize that Africa has continued to be suppressed and continue to produce, to be the major producer of raw materials for the world, yet we are the poorest. I would actually refer back to some sentiment by one Lord Macleay, saying, after visiting Africa way back, he has his remarks as, I have moved the length and breadth of Africa, and I haven't seen anyone who is a beggar. And I haven't seen anyone, there's no anyone like a thief. These people are intact in terms of their culture, in terms of believing in themselves. But what should we do? What we are today, Africa, is a product of a strategy by the West to destroy Africa. And this is deliberately put in this whole thing called globalization to make sure that we are dismantled our backbone culturally. We no longer believe in ourselves. So every system, from the educational system, which is in place, religious, everything has been made deliberately so that we are in turmoil the way we are today as Africa. And like I said, I won't be long. I continue to pose the question, is this globalization or colonization for Africa? Let's unpack this topic. Is it globalization or colonization? Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Is it globalization or colonization? Cornelius Omuse, I don't know, what do you think you make of that this afternoon?
Good afternoon, Miriam, Dr. Matsanga, Daniel Wesonga, Tawish, and all the panelists. Today, I'm glad to have rejoined you after a very long period of time. And
we seem to be having a problem with your audio, please. It's muted. Could you please fix that?
Many thanks, Miriam, Dr. Matsanga, the United Kingdom, and all the panelists. It's a very wonderful opportunity to see you one more time in this wonderful discussion about the pre-COP that is of 26. And I'm glad that this discussion comes at a time when the world has actually been given a rude awakening. And Dr. Matsanga has been telling us every now and then that nature has got a very unique way of communicating. And that came in the year 2019 when we were almost coming to the end when COVID-19 struck. And when COVID-19 struck, it actually gave this impression that all over the world, whether you come from Far East, whether you come from America, whether you come from Europe or from Africa, there's one thing, that Africans are one people, all people are equal. And looking into now globalization and asking whether Africa is part of globalization, my answer is yes, that Africa is part of globalization, but the big worry here that comes in is that we are part of globalization, but just as one of the panelists said, that at the receiving end, that in most instances, things are happening globally, but at the end of the day, the main losers are Africans. Look at our climate, how it's been before, look at the resources that we have, look even at our phenotype, our strength, how we do things. You find out that Africans, we are capable of doing so many things in a better way, but everything has not been happening in the right way simply because that Africans have always been put into positions that they incite one another, they find themselves into wars, and in the process, our resources are taken away. And just looking into the situation of Zimbabwe this morning, a few hours ago, the United Nations have actually given some of its opinions to the United States of America that there's a better way they can address the matter of Zimbabwe, simply because the people who are suffering are those ones who are vulnerable. The poor people are suffering because of these consequences. And the United Nations have given some of the recommendations that there can be structured a dialogue looking into these matters. How can Zimbabwe address some of those issues that is being viewed to be a problem that has made them to find themselves into a position of being given sanctions? And in the process that this happens, we believe that Zimbabwe can find itself in the right path to actually come back and renew its economy. And at the end of it all, we can realize that also the good climate that Zimbabwe had and other countries in Africa can find a better way. So what also should be happening as we also look into what other world powers are doing, we as Africans ourselves, how are we coming together to see that we actually have that sort of patriotism to our continent? When we are given positions actually to rule, either being in the ruling party or being in the opposition, do we side with foreign powers to see that we sabotage our own systems, or we come out and call things as they are? So this is timely, and we believe that actually as the question goes in our discussion, is Africa part of globalization? The answer is no, because looking at the goals of COP26, we have a mitigation. You don't mitigate these temperatures if actually those big industries all over the world, and some of them that have been brought in Africa, they are not being regulated. Adaptation. We cannot adapt in a way when we find out that even at the decision-making table at the United Nations forums, Africans, how our voices being taken there. And another elephant in the room here today is actually about the finance, both the public finance and the private finance. At times, our position are not that good when it comes to finances, and we cannot come in actually to mitigate, or we cannot come in to address this issue to do with climate change if our finances are not in a better position. And lastly, one of the goals also is collaboration. And collaboration comes in to ensure that partnerships are done, the private makers, the stakeholders in different sectors come together. But how are Africans being actually involved in all these matters? So this conversation is timely, and I believe that it is time Africans, one more time, we have that renaissance coming together and addressing matters that are actually facing us, not forgetting that as we move forward, as we improve Kenya, as we improve Uganda, as we improve Tanzania, we have not to leave behind Zimbabwe. We should not forget Libya. We should not forget Morocco, Tunisia. All of us have to come together and move in the right place.
Okay.
I submit.
Thank you so much, Cornelius Omuse. Very precise there. Right now, take us back to the UK, where Doc will bring us our next panelist. Dr. Matsanga, if you can hear me. Dr. Matsanga, back to you. And for the panel, the participants who have joined the link, could you please just mute unless you are the one speaking? If you're not the one speaking at that time, please could you just mute so that you don't get to interfere with the smooth running of the conversation. Thank you so much. Back to you, Doctor.
Thank you very much, participants across the globe, wherever you are in Zimbabwe. I want to thank the delegates in Zimbabwe who have just spoken. Thank you very much. Those watching from home and across the planet. This is a conference by Pan-African Forum, together with Punchline Africa Television. Miriam and Samuel Tawish are moderators. Thank you very much, Honorable former Minister of Transport in the British government, Dr. Paul Clark. Dr. Paul Clark was the Minister of Transport and Communication in the Labour government. He has been one of those key members on various issues on climate change, road safety, consultancies across the planet and the globe. He's widely traveled, widely, researched on a number of problems that Africa faces. Dr. Paul Clark, the point here is, are we in Africa part of our globalization? Are we part of the village, or we are not part of the village? And this plus any other thing that you want to deliver to us in this Pre-Cop26 summit, as leaders gather in Glasgow next week from Monday, is there something that Africa can learn? Is there something that we can learn? Is there a conflict eroding our ecosystems? That is what is. Another person has asked, is it globalization or colonialism? So have we parted two things? Are we recolonizing ourselves, being recolonized because of resources? Who is bringing conflicts in Libya, Chad, DRC, Congo? We hear of a cable being laid on Garamba Park. The forests in Congo are being, removed. Trees are being cut, sent to China. Lorries roll through Africa to go to China to make bamboo materials and bring it back to sell to Africa. What is going on? Our ecosystems are collapsing on the continent. Welcome to the show. I hand you over back to the microphone, Honorable Minister, to tell us more what Her Majesty's government probably is doing and what they intend to do in this question of ecosystems and environment, climate change, which is threatening the world. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Dr. Paul Clark.
David, good morning, and good morning to all colleagues around the world, wherever you are, and whatever time it is, morning, afternoon. I think you want me to give you the definitive answers to all those questions in the next 5 minutes, but that is a tall order, as you'll appreciate.
No, you have,
and also,
since you are the Honorable Minister of United Kingdom, 10 minutes is not bad.
No.
10 minutes.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I was just thinking, one of the things I would never suggest is, that I have the answers or that we all have the answers, because actually to meet the challenges that today's world faces does need genuine globalization of us all working together, and in some cases putting our money where our mouth is, and that comes back to obviously some of the the G7, the G20 countries and so on, and organizations like the World Bank, etc. but I'm not going to. I'm not in a position to say this is, the way that we solve all these problems. I can tell you a bit about where I'm at, what I believe, and thank you for the introduction you gave me, David. I was privileged to be for some 13 years a member of the British Parliament and Minister, and covering housing, planning, regeneration, and, as David said, Minister of Transport, and covered all forms of transport. And when I left government, now some sort of 10 years ago, I set up my own organisation called Gateway Associates, to really look at a number of issues and to draw together, indeed, many people and experts in or professionals in given areas that, so we could find some of the answers to some of the challenges that were ahead of us. And David mentioned one of those was around road safety. Some of the stuff which I still do today in India, in Nepal, and indeed in some other countries as well as the UK. In fact, where I started just after leaving Parliament in Uganda and Kenya, indeed where I met David and many others. Since then, I've also been working in Nigeria and particularly in Sierra Leone, over clearly in West Africa. And I'll come back to that in a moment, and about perhaps some of the issues that help to meet the challenges of COP26, of putting flesh on the bones of the strategic development goals and making life a reality and not an existence for so many millions of people, which is an absolute disgrace in this 21st century. But I think I heard literally the tail end of the last speaker, I think from Zimbabwe, saying that no, Africa is not part of globalization because of the things that are going on. And let's just look at the whole, take a moment to look at pandemic situation. And, my former colleague and friend, Gordon Brown, has been leading the charge with to the G7, for example, back in mid of this year, to get the G7 to, yes, in this case, put their money where their mouth is, and to get vaccines and support to the rest of the world and LDCs and so on. And as Gordon put it, nobody's safe until everyone is safe. For me to do business, I want to know that I'm as safe as possible wherever I go in the world. And equally, people coming here and trading here and operating here or just visiting friends. We want that all to continue. And I now, because of changes that have happened with the governance of travel here in the UK, I'm looking forward to next month, for the first time in some 18 months, to be able to go back to Sierra Leone to now put into place all the work that we've been doing during the lockdowns and the COVID period. But now we've got the situation where some of the world has responded to saying, yes, of course, it's absolutely scandalous that we end up with countries that have got, vaccinations at less than 5% of their population. And we've got levels of 95% or whatever here in the UK and elsewhere in the Western world. That can't be right. And now we have the position whereby the promises of the vaccinations, the logistics aren't right. So in fact, only the other day, Gordon was actually asking for military aircraft to be used to airlift the vaccinations, some 240 million jabs immediately, to be airlifted to some of the 92 lowest developed countries, so that actually that program can happen. And the reason why, the danger is we could lose over 100 million jabs could be lost because they've gone by their sell-by date, which would be no good for anyone, but would be an absolute waste when we have the challenge. So hopefully, clearly, the likes of the UK, the US, et al. Will actually get their act together so that the logistics are such that we get these vaccinations moved. But of course, it's not only just delivering vaccinations, it is also the training and the awareness of what needs to be done and the support mechanisms on the ground. But this cannot be beyond the wit of man and woman to be able to deliver this in the 21st century if people are determined to do it. And as we go back to what Paul said, nobody's safe until everybody is safe. And that, I think, is fundamentally important. Let me just turn now to COP26 and also strategic development goals. Look, you and I know that leaders the world over can travel to nice big meetings. They go along and they'll sign documents like the SDGs, for example, and say, wonderful, great, look how good we all are. And this is across globally. Speak as a former politician. Look how good we are. And then the reality of putting them into a real challenge in some cases, and also the lack of commitment that there is in other cases to really make that difference. We have to do that. And one of the things I'm calling for is to change our whole aid program. We need smart aid. We need to have a system whereby we look to aid being developed on a finance-led commercial investment, because that has sustainability. It makes the real difference. So, and I'll come to a specific project in a moment where to try and explain this. Invariably, aid has been given, and it's been very helpful. Don't get me wrong. It's been very helpful to meet emergencies, initial things that need to be dealt with. And if they do go a bit further in helping to develop maybe skills and so on, they're isolated. There's no follow through. There's not the linkages that need to happen to make actually money go further, but more importantly, to have a lasting change and effect. And so we've been calling for what we're calling smart aid, that really does have a partnership with developing countries modeled around clearly finance-led commercial investment, but working also with the donor organizations. And this to be set against clearly the economic priorities and goals of the given country that we're talking about. This isn't about usurping anything like that. So we're not going back to colonialism, I can assure you, David. But we want to see that happen. And I'm just thinking, when we come to COP26, I hope that people will be saying the right things, but you've then got to do it. I mean, what's unbelievable that this week we've had a budget in the UK which has actually lowered a duty on passenger airfares within the UK, which is a pretty small country in terms of miles. But the message that sends out is, I think, the wrong thing. But we have to recognise that I've got a project now in Sierra Leone, which is truly integrated, which is about making that lasting difference. And it happened, I'll just tell you this story to illustrate this and to illustrate what needs to be happening in the UK, at COP26 and other global meetings where our leaders go. A gentleman came to me in Sierra Leone basically and said, I've got 9 acres of land. I want to build a secondary school because the boys and girls have to walk at least 12 miles to get to a secondary school. I've got 9 acres of land. I want to build it and I want to name it after my grandfather. Fine. But he obviously hadn't got the finance to build it. Okay, we've got the finance to build it. But actually, does that go far enough? What happens to the kids when they get an education, which is good in itself, but what are the jobs? What are the prospects? How can they take that forward? And actually, then you start to look at it. And you and I know, issues with agriculture, the produce that gets wasted because it can't get to market, because even domestic markets, and certainly then more perhaps lucrative export markets, the wherewithal, the knowledge, the ability to be able to do that is all a skill in itself for bringing all that together. And yet could make a real difference to that farm, to that family, to that community. So, okay, what's the problem with that? Well, there isn't warehousing, there isn't the storage facility, certainly not reliable refrigerated storage. Why is that? Because there's problems with power. And so we will incorporate in our what we call Project Alpha Plus, a truly integrated program. We'll incorporate solar power so that becomes reliable. It then can help to replace some of actually in the area where we're talking about mining operations, which are using polluting diesel and so on and so forth. Let's look at clean energy there. So we start to put into practice what they're going to talk about at COP26 this week. Let's put it into practice. Let's make sure that, in a sense, I always look at the phone system. In the UK, of course, we all had landlines and cables and so on and so forth. Today, of course, we all use things like this, unbelievably, whether it's whatever sort of phone it is, but it doesn't need all that. So in a sense, people have been able to skip that level of operation in the scales that it was here. They've been able to say, well, let's skip the polluting atmosphere of all the heavy diesels and so on and so forth, if we can, with clean energy, but putting this into real use in our project, for example, in our plus, that then gives a reliable, clean, green energy source for the school, for the kids to learn, to have reliability, to be able to read even when it's dark, so they can see in the classroom. It gives a reliable source to businesses. It gives a reliable source of energy that can actually create refrigerated storage for the agricultural produce that then can be then stored and used. And then we're able to introduce logistics systems around a business park that can actually then start to look at how do you get those to market, how do you get better returns for the local community, and let's look at export markets. So this is about putting into reality an air that will be expelled in Glasgow this week that has been giving reality to the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. Let's make a reality. But it needs us all to work in partnership. And that does include, let's be honest, that does include governments across the globe getting in place systems that relate to their communities and their country, but help then clearly that process of integration with people. And it's not about globalization. And one of the things we're very clear about is this is about empowerment and development of skills of local people and not flying everyone in from outside. We don't want that. That's not what it's about. Let's help us all on that journey. And until we get that right, none of us are safe. None of us can go forward in a truly global world that we need to have to take everyone forward. Thank you, David. Thank you for that time to allow me to speak. I'm much appreciative, and hopefully what I've said is showing that we want, in my little neck of the woods, my little corner of operation, my colleagues, we do want to make that difference, and we want to make sure that, as I say, all the words that our leaders can talk about, whoever they be, whichever country they're from, let's let's turn those things into reality for the people of Africa. You're mute, David.
Okay. Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you very much. We meet later on, either today or tomorrow. And yes. I think some people on the panel have some worries, questions, and especially the question of sanctions on Zimbabwe. Most people have raised them. I've raised them myself, that the ecosystems in Zimbabwe and the environment have collapsed because the United States does not allow Zimbabwe to have access to its financial obligations, to be able to bring in money in order to keep the environment and the ecosystems in Zimbabwe. And that has indeed punished the people of Zimbabwe. And for us to sit in Scotland, watch the situation in Zimbabwe go from how do we keep the ecosystems? How do we keep the environment? For example, we are very lucky that Zimbabwe worked so hard on COVID-19 that the catastrophe there was not compared to any African country. I think they did very well in terms of containing COVID-19, thanks to God. But the hospitals in that country have no medicines. People are dying of diseases that could be cured. But America, I'm happy that Britain removed some of the sanctions, all of them, and they have allowed His Excellency, the President of Zimbabwe, to come to United Kingdom for the first time, which is a very great. I want to thank Her Majesty's government for listening to us, some of us Africans from 1998 who have stood up and said we should engage the people of Zimbabwe. I'm very happy, and I think you are one of those who had the same opinion, that we should engage the people of Zimbabwe instead of isolating them. So this is the elephant in the house, that most of the conflicts Africans have are not their own conflicts. The conflicts are brought from, look at Libya, look at Chad, look at the DRC Congo, look at Somalia. The problems that we are solving that destroy the ecosystems and the environment are not ours. They are brought by superpowers across Europe, namely France, and then across the Atlantic, United States of America. So people are saying, hello, how can we be in a global market when we still have these problems? That is one of the concerns. Maybe you will come back later. Anybody else, before I hand over the microphone back to the moderators. If you have a question, don't spend much time, just ask a question. Abigail.
Thank you, Dr. Matsanga. You just highlighted the issue around the sanctions. I feel that I need to give a little background so that when we talk about this, the background on sanctions is such that sometime in 1888, about over a century ago, the colonizers entered Zimbabwe. They took away the native Zimbabwe's land using some repressive laws such as the Land Apportionment Act, the Land Husbandry Act, and this led to the first and second Chimurenga in Zimbabwe. The agenda behind the first and second Chimurenga, which led us into independence in 1980, was the land question. So in 2000, Zimbabweans, or Zimbabwe, under the leadership of the later President R.G. Mugabe, decided to correct this issue, which has been the reason behind all these issues that led to the Chimurengas. Now, in 2000, this is when the issue of human rights that led to the Zijera and sanctions began to become an issue. So the issue of human rights in Zimbabwe did not start all that period when these people were taking our land. Now, human rights is now a topic because Zimbabweans decided to correct this error by making sure that the land is now back to its original owners. Now we realize that from 2002 going forward, we begin to have local NGOs sponsored by George Soros and America beginning to say we now have human rights violations in Zimbabwe, as if by the time they took our land here in Zimbabwe, there were no human beings. There were no human rights to talk of. So the Board of Contention only started in 2000 when Zimbabweans decided to get back their land. And they did not even chase the whites. They said, let's at least have a fair and equitable distribution of the land so that we allow to correct the error behind colonization, where the native Zimbabweans had lost control of their own resource. That is the land. Now, we are being made to believe that human rights is a question linked with the sanctions, human rights abuse. When did they become conscious of human rights abuse in Zimbabwe? Just recent in 2000. Why? Because their interest in Zimbabwe has been exposed. They feel that they are the best people to define themselves as human beings. This is why we have the scenario around human rights abuse, Zidera, and then now the illegal sanctions imposed on Zimbabwe. And of course, they bought the proxies. They purchased even the civic space. They purchased the media space. They actually managed to infiltrate Zimbabwe using the opposition leaders, who are, of course, the likes of Tendai Biti, the later Morgan Tsvangirai and others. I was part of that anyway, that setup in the opposition. We believed in the notion that the sanctions were targeted. We felt at some point that maybe it was dealing with our own political opponents in some way, only to realize that the sanctions are dealing with our own mothers. They are dealing with our own communities. So now we need this error to be corrected, and we need, of course, to take heed of the call by the UN Special Rapporteur, who just left the country. And the call is clear. Zimbabwe must be allowed actually to compete in the rest of all nations globally. If you are to talk of globalization equally, why suppressing Zimbabwe? The agenda behind it has got nothing to do with human rights violations. If anything, is about the land question. Why Zimbabweans, they are questioning why Zimbabweans had to take back their land. After all, it was our land. We are not apologetic about it. So I think these are issues that probably the panel may also benefit to understand the background behind these sanctions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. If you have time, I want to hand you over back to the studios. Just in a summary, this is a debate. You are going to engage more Africans and more people on Zimbabwe issue. Time is now for you to re-engage the people of Zimbabwe, to find a solution, to talk about what can be done. Why have we gone wrong? Why did we go wrong? We did not engage. But the time has come. I'm happy with the government of Britain, with Johnson, who has said, no, let's engage. Boris says, let's engage. Let's engage the people of Zimbabwe. Let's call the president of Zimbabwe to the United Kingdom and engage him, find a solution. Zimbabwe has tried, it worked hard. It has paid. It's paying some of the farmers who lost their property. They have paid back. Surely, there is no need of America stopping them from commercial entities across the planet. Why? Why should there be sanctions? Yet in America itself, nobody has put sanctions. They went to Taliban. They ran away with their trousers in the knees. You know, they left the Taliban as they found them. We are worried in East Africa, Honorable Minister. They might even leave us with Al-Shabaab killing us. No, so now we in East Africa, we are prepared for this Al-Shabaab. In case Americans run at night, like the way they ran away in the Taliban in Afghanistan. So people are worried. Why should you put sanctions on a country up to now when other European countries have removed the sanctions? That is the core. And we are going to sit in Scotland with these men who talk about sanctions. That's why we called this conference, are we in the global partnership or we are spectators? That is the question on the floor. Are we spectators? Are we second-class citizens? Or that's what Africans are saying. The vaccination, for example, Dr. Paul Clark, for example, you finished the United Kingdom here, all of us were vaccinated first, then you said we have left with something for you. So how would we have survived? We survived by God's will. But thanks very much. Still, you have done very well. But now time has come for us to engage some of these issues.
But look,
yes.
If I just pick up on what you just said. Yeah. And look what happened. I mean, because the UK and European Union and US all put in, because they had the resources, put in great big orders for vaccinations that weren't even then developed. But, you know, most countries can't do that in advance. And if I say nobody thought that'd be unfair, but obviously, it was about us, when I say us, not just the UK, worrying about their own. Now, of course, any government needs to worry about the very people that they're elected to represent. But we also have certainly a moral duty to recognise that, you know, we're bloody fortunate, excuse my French, but we are fortunate because we could do that, but everywhere else isn't. And indeed, going back to the previous contributor who very clearly, you know, posed the question, why are suddenly human rights important today when they weren't important when, you know, you were colonial powers and doing it? Absolutely right, spot on. And I can't answer you that other than this. Many of you may know this, that in the last, I suppose, year, there has been a big question mark here in the UK about, particularly about visual icons who were seen as successful from colonial times. So there has been big discussions going on about statues and so on of people who delivered a lot, but actually on the back of actually slavery and so on and colonialism, with some barbaric consequences. Real discussions going on about whether those people should be not revered, but have statues and so on. A small thing in itself, but very big in terms of people questioning and raising those issues. So rest assured, I agree entirely with you that, you know, what happened back in the 1880s and before wasn't right then and wouldn't be right today. Having said that, let's hope that we are all more enlightened today and we learn by the consequences. But as I said, when it came to the vaccinations, there's a moral duty to us to recognise where countries are, and for whatever reason that they are where they are economically, then we have to recognise that there needs to be help in that way. Sorry, David, can you mute? Because I can hear that. It's a bit disconcerting, sorry. What I was going to say then in terms of how do we go forward? Yes, there's been some movement as far as the UK government's concerned. All welcome. Okay, fine. But, you know, we need to do more. COP26 or the environment, let's put it like that, and the real danger to our whole world, and I do mean the whole world, which is important to all of us, might mean that there'll be a better focus on literally saving the planet rather than just on narrow economic issues. As important as those are, we need to. And, you know, I take this example. I think someone was talking about ripping down rainforests and so on and sending it off to China, the wood and all that and so on, just to fuel their businesses and so on and so forth. Well, of course, if there are no alternatives for those local communities or understanding of what is happening when they do that, and they need to put food on the table, they need to be able to buy some food from the market to be able to feed the kids and feed themselves. If you don't provide alternative opportunities that are more sustainable, then what are they to do? This is what's incumbent upon us to get right. And that's why things like I was talking about my program, Project Alpha Plus, which could be anywhere, frankly. It could be, it doesn't have to be Sierra Leone, could be in Zimbabwe, could be in Nigeria, could be in Malawi, wherever, in Kenya. It is about making sure that the sustainability is there and that there's an economy there that can help to support those families and those individuals. But I do think now what needs to happen, and Zimbabwe is a classic example, the understanding of the general public of foreign affairs is woefully bad within the UK, but it is in other countries as well, where there are people that need to be influenced. And don't assume that even at members of parliament level, that there is an understanding of what, you know, the government is trying to do and is having success in doing in Zimbabwe or in Kenya or in Malawi, you know, because they just don't know. They have no, there's almost, I say there's no way, because the gender in many of our lives is very crowded. People pick on things that they do. So I think that there is a need to actually have a steady, I won't call it an offensive, but to start to change that, to start to educate those influencers. I'm not talking about the Boris Johnsons, but people that are around Boris Johnson as Prime Minister here, or people that are around Keir Starmer that are here. If they are putting pressure on those people and the Foreign Secretary and the international development people, then clearly there can be a change and a better understanding that all countries do things that are negative. None of us are bloody perfect by any means. And so, and it's always the bad things that tend to hit the headlines. It's the same the world over, rather than good things that are happening. So we need to rebalance that. We need to be getting that message across. We need to be using the parliaments and the democracies and so on that exist in those countries where change needs to happen, to be raising, hey, have you seen what's been happening in X or Y, Zimbabwe, wherever, and getting that. It's not a 5-minute job, but it is a process that must happen. We can't rewrite history. We need to learn from history, and we need to recognise what that has taught us or should have taught us and what we need to do. But as I say, it's a process that needs to happen, and we need to work at it, all of us working together as a global community.
Very well. Thank you so much, Dr. Paul Clark. Doc, is there anything else you'd like to add before I take us back to...
No, Miriam, there are so many speakers waiting. Dr. Clark, Paul Clark, thank you. You have done your explanation. Thank you very much. I have nothing, Miriam. I hand over the whole keys.
Okay.
From London, here,
Thanks.
Glasgow, here we come. with a message. We are here. Africa must be fair. The future generation must stand. Africa must rise and shine again. And I will fight for that when God gives me the strength. Remove sanctions on Zimbabwe. Thank you.
David, I look forward to seeing you, David. And can I just say to everyone, I mean, I'm more than happy always to have a dialogue with people because you're always learning. And learning from yourselves would be great. So I was going to say, if anyone wants my email address, so on, David, I mean, you've got it. Please feel free to put it out by all means. And maybe ask the other people in Glasgow. Thank you very much.
Let's have some coffee today or tomorrow, somewhere in town before we leave for Glasgow. God bless you up in London. Thank you very much. Back to you, Miriam.
Thank you so much.
Punchline Africa TV.
All right, thank you so much, and thank you so much for your time today. So I'll just take us back to my co-presenter, Samuel Tawish, and he'll bring us our next panelist.
Thank you so much, Miriam. Thank you, Dr. Matsanga. Thank you, Dr. Paul Clark, and of course, Abigail, for the submissions you've made, and of course, everyone else who has already made the submissions. But again, we understand we have lined up a host of other speakers who will be giving in their submissions in just a short while. Maybe if I should just let you know, we have Galma Dido, we also have Kanyi Ndegwa, we have Samuel Wairegi and Sharon Gitonga, as well as Javan Karanja, and so many other speakers, of course, who have spoken.
We are being covered by News Central. You have seen them. They are here. Are you seeing them?
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Matsanga, for that reminder. Indeed, I've seen them.
The biggest channels across Africa is covering us. Thank you very much. They are here. Then we have Mr. Samuel Wairegi, Mr. Babu Titus. Then we have Mr. Isaac. I think those are the ones you are not seeing on the bigger screen, because my screen is very big right now here. Behind here, you can't see.
Thank you so much, Dr. Matsanga, for that clarification. Now, let me have shortly, let's have
here. We have Dr. Sir James Breathwaite, who is going to make closing remarks. Is here in the room. Thank you very much. I don't have the cameraman to change the camera for you to see, but we're here. We have quite a number of people here. And by the way, I came on the plane with the Minister of Environment, Forests, and Tobiko from your place. Is from your Mara place there, Kajiado. We came together, we sat on the plane together. He's already ahead in Glasgow. I will be following them tomorrow or Sunday. Yes, to make a point for Africa. Be listening. I know it is banning. Mr. Dido is banning to come to ban the engine. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you so much, Dr. Matsanga. Without much ado, let me now have this opportunity for Galma Dido really to make his remarks. Thereafter, we'll be having Sharon Gitonga and Kanyi, of course, Ndegwa, as well as Samuel Wairegi. Let's have Galma Dido make his remarks.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed an honor to have a platform to talk about the future of planet Earth as far as climate change, conservation and adaptation is concerned. So currently, whatever is happening in Glasgow, the COP26, we have a lot of questions, and concerns to, ask as far as these deliberations is concerned. People have given their, historical background. Dr. David Matsanga, our guest, they have talked about this. But I would like to begin my argument from the aspect of globalization as far as, the issue of climate change is concerned. And I will always say, one of the great leaders Africa ever had, that is Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, when he said, in tackling, problems, in tackling political issues, it's not what you desire to earn, but it is how you live according to your needs. That is a basic definition of, African socialism, and even the application of socialism everywhere in this world. The problem we are experiencing as far as climate change, and why is it that for 30 years, when this convener of parties, the COP, was created, nothing has been done. Just as that young lady from, Sweden, Greta Thunberg, used to say, blah, 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 nothing else has been done. It's because we are competing with a commercialized, unfair global demand for goods and services. Why am I speaking about this? In Africa, where access to basic needs, that is food, water, and shelter, is a problem, you get, in the name of unfair foreign direct investment, FDI, from, global north, coming to you, coming to Congo, and telling the people of Congo, why can't you surrender your resources to us so that we can provide you with basic needs, that is food, water, and shelter? So you tend to find it is not even the intention of the Africans themselves to destroy the resources they have or to surrender the resources they have, but it is as a result of what is happening on other parts of this planet. Look at what is currently happening in Madagascar. Actually, I will say, if there is a country which, it has nothing to do with the problem of climate change, it has nothing to do with the problem of, issues of, demand and supply and, conservation, it is Madagascar, the country with the largest and the longest coastlines in Africa. Currently, Madagascar is experiencing the worst period of drought in more than 47 years. And that is a country, when you look at its carbon emission, actually, it's one of the least emitters of carbon countries in the world. And yet this is a country down here in the Indian Ocean, suffering because of the circumstances and consequences being done by the countries, especially in the global north. And when Dr. Matsanga, you said, are we spectators or are we truly the actors of globalization? I will firstly say we are not, even being called spectator is a big deal. We are victims of this aspect of globalization. How can you convince the largest polluter in the world, that is America and China and America respectively, to reduce on their carbon emission when the global demand for goods, when the global demand for mahogany, when the global demand for illegal fish in Namibia is on the rise? And still you have the audacity of saying we can bring the African states on board. Actually, we are not spectators. We are victims of whatever is happening. How I feel that the conservation sector in this continent should have never been affected by climate change. But whether we like it or not, the killing, the poaching of these animals, the degradation of our environment in the name of private developers coming from foreign countries, coming from abroad to, try to grab some section of Nairobi National Park is what we feel we are doing, but there are a lot of invincible hand behind this. And to make it worse, all these factors in play, yet the actors of this climate change summit, they have audacity of saying we are going to reduce the emission by 2050, by 2060, by 2070. Like, it's impossible. Like the other day, Saudi Arabia said we are going to reduce our carbon emission by 2060. And this is a country, 90% of its foreign revenue, 90% of its, remittances are based on oil. We are not just pragmatic. And to make it worse, African states, the kind of grants and aid in the name of climate change adaptation, one of them being the famous carbon trading we are being given, is a short-term policy. It is not a long-term policy. When we speak of a climate change, this is something which is evolving. It's something which is not taking today, tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow. So if they believe that by giving African states some financial help and telling them you go and implement, you go plant trees, you go do 1 tree, and still in the name of carbon trading, they still account for the largest emission of carbon dioxide, then we are not serious about this. So my humble plea, as far as all these issues are concerned, I think when they speak about climate change, for the first time in the history of 21st century, we are now seeing flooding in Germany. We are seeing all manners of hurricanes and cyclones happening in America. The global north have been using African example for far too long. They've been using the African analogy of saying climate change is really changing a lot of dynamics in Africa. Actually, 90% of the conflicts you are seeing in Africa are as a result of unfair competition of the resources we have. You speak of Cabo Delgado. ExxonMobil is there, one of the largest American companies dealing with oil. When we speak of, when we speak of Sudan, when we speak of Mali, the Sahel, the Maghreb region, all these are competition for resources. So if indeed they believe that the global north can be the actors and the drivers of this climate change issue, I think they should reverse the agenda and give the mantle to the victims, who are the African countries at large, so that the only thing they can issue and give abundantly to these African states is financial independence. When I speak of financial independence, this climate change issue is something which is very individualized now. Like we have a role as a citizen, the role goes to the head of state, the role goes to African continent and goes to the larger planet Earth. And I will say to them confidently as a nomad, if you think the way Taliban used to say Americans have weapons and bullets, we've got time, I think we don't have time here. Time is not on our side. Leave alone even the issue of degradation. Some of the river streams at a local community we used to have are no longer there. And it is as a result of macro activities happening at a top level in the name of decision-making process. The era of conservation is no more. The global north are coming to Africa with the enterprise of conservancy. And this conservancy has been made in a way that they are saying, let us conserve the littoral resources which has been left in Africa for the animals, and they fence it. And they will tell you, we are conserving the environment, we are conserving the normal pastoralism way of individuals. Things are not working. So if they believe by deliberation and by talking in Glasgow that things can be solved, one of the things I will suggest to them, if indeed you really want to believe that climate change can be tackled, as you are saying that by 2030, they want to reduce 1.5 degrees Celsius of the normal global temperature, then that is a fallacy. Because we are not seeing how unfair capitalism is killing this enterprise of the resources we have in Africa. We have the capacity to compete with other, nations. But what if that capacity is being threatened with unfair, competition for resources? As long as America is going to be ultra-capitalist state, as long as United Kingdom, as long as Norway, France, they are going to be ultra-capitalist in that everyone compete for ultra-exploitation of their resources to the level, to the best level, then we are going nowhere. We are now seeing competition for the Arctic. Every state now, the veto, the permanent members of UN, everyone they really want to have a stake in the Arctic Circle. We've seen the other day Russia exploring the region with their big, warship in the name of trying to look for ecosystem. So all these things are happening, but we are trying to divert from the real attention of just trying to say we can deliberate on policies of which it is not going to work. What shall work in tackling climate change? Do not deal with governments. Don't deal with governments and head of state. Deal with communities at a lower level. If you are United Nations, leave that surpassing of the government of, let's say the government of Kenya or the government of Tanzania or Uganda. Go directly to where the problem is. The same way you've been dealing with the refugee crisis, whereby the United Nations Commission for Human Rights, the way they are dealing with issues of, refugee and humanitarian influx in Kenya, they don't even at much level engage so much on Kenyan government. They have a direct access to Kakuma and Dadaab refugee camp. So climate change, if they are going to give resources, let them deal with two aspects: the civil societies and the NGOs and the private sector. I think the government has already shown us that they have really failed in implementing the aspects of climate change. That is what is evident across the globe. So let us change from the narrative of dealing with governments and the authorities. Fine, let them be the partners, but let's give much, indulgence and financial, engagement to local enterprise, local communities at a local level. And this is not something which is miracle. United Nations have the capacity and the manpower to engage. They have been engaging with local communities when there is aspect of war, crimes, the aspects of, what is currently happening in Tigray, that they are using international community to surpass the region and to give humanitarian aid. That can be done. But saying the main topic of currently the COP26 is about financial commitment of these nation states. Africa, we already have corruption cases. We cannot manage our funds very well. Name it, from the foreign aid, from our own revenue, from our own source revenue, that is OSR. Let them do this. Let them allow these funds to come directly to actors who are being affected. If it is in terms of pastoralism and conservation, let them handle the community suffering from this. That is the only way we are going to surpass the monster of corruption, which I feel is a big threat as far as tackling climate change aspect is concerned in this country and in this continent of Africa. So my humble submission to the dear panelist and Dr. David Matsanga in UK, what we want is not memorandum. What we want is not mere writing. What we want is not the blah blah of by 2050, by 2070, by 2030. What we want is immediate and direct access of the affected areas. Like the Horn of Africa, we are suffering from drought, climate change. What can you do? Avail the funds and make it in a way that a local man, a local CBO can stand up and write to UN and they say, we want to plant 5,000 trees. We want to have this stream being revived. Let them engage with, this bureaucracy of involving government, regional organization in the name of AU, IGAD, EAC, EU. By the time that fund trickles down to the local enterprise, everything has been exhausted. So my humble submission is, in dealing with climate change, let them simplify how they are going to channel whatever they mean in financial commitment, resource commitment, material commitment, and even leadership commitment in tackling climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Galma Dido, for your submissions. At this particular time, I really want to also request that the panelists, those who are going to get the opportunity to speak, at least try to limit yourselves to at most 2 minutes, because when I look into the time remaining between now and when we are supposed to wind up on this summit, and we have a record about almost 18 panelists who are supposed to make their submissions. So time may not really be enough if each of us can spend more than 2 minutes. At this particular time now, let me have Sharon Gitonga to make her submission. Thereafter, we'll also be having, of course, Samuel Wairegi. I also acknowledge, of course, the presence on the panel of Makapila Juliet, all the way from UK. Welcome so much on board. You'll be having an opportunity really to make your remarks in due course. Sharon Gitonga, it's your time.
Thank you very much, Samuel Tawish, and a very good afternoon to you, Dr. Matsanga, at the Political Command Center, and to all our viewers watching us across the globe at large, and all our protocols observed. First of all, I would like to say that for me, globalization is not so new, and I would actually love to draw my attention to a biblical context, that teaches about the role of globalization, and that is on, the Tower of Babel, and you discover that it actually takes more than one language to make a people one. That is why, if you continue to read largely on that context, you realize one of the reasons that actually God had to intervene when he saw that, people had actually wanted to make a name for themselves, and that is why he had to, confuse and make different languages. So you realize one of the most negative impacts of, especially when it comes to social globalization, is that there's a push for freedom and space to build a certain city, if I can call it. There's a pressure to speak a certain language. The world has become so materialistic and, so individualistic. And that is why God had to, at some point, actually confuse the language. If you look, keenly at this context, you discover that far and wide, this is actually globalization. I would love to, turn your attention to cultural. Well, I would love to talk about cultural globalization, which I feel like we have actually lost our culture because we have had, nations have had to adopt to certain principles, beliefs of other nations, by interpenetration of different cultures. So, by this far and large, you realize that we have actually lost our unique culture to a unique globalized culture. If I can talk about technology globalization, which I feel like it's actually, for me, is actually an elephant in the room, because this is definitely what has actually defined each and every one of us today. And if I can, case in point of COVID-19, that actually saw everything at still stands, every part of the continent, from the UK to all the way to here in Nairobi, where we are right now. And the biggest question is, I would actually love to pose to everyone is, how do you know how natural, this COVID-19 pandemic is? Not just COVID. Talk about, these foreign diseases like HIV/AIDS. We've also had Ebola. We've had the likes of, swine flu. How do we know that these are actually not man-made? These are we've seen these are actually diseases that we've seen so many of us who, by losing lives that to some extent that was actually not meant to be lost. When you look at another origin of, if I can call it a weird syndrome, from the Chinese bats, snakes, in China, you actually discover that these are actually edible, and it is actually a woe unto the poor of us as Africa, where drugs actually get to reach us last. And like Dr. Matsanga actually earlier on alluded to, we actually get we are actually the remnants that we actually get to get the last of these drugs, which is quite unfortunate in that regard. When I look at agricultural globalization, you find that there has been a high intake of the GMOs, the GMOs, especially in the agricultural field, and you discover that this has actually increased pesticide chemicals that have actually in turn poisoned our African soils, and actually increased in cancer and other congenital abnormalities that have actually been on the rise among many children in Africa, even with the rise of lifestyle diseases that have ended up claiming so many people. I would love also to look at globalization, especially where environment is concerned, and especially at this time where we are all looking at an economic climatic change crisis. There are so many impacts, negative impacts that have actually arisen as a result of the technology and so many manufacturing industries, especially for these African countries, where you see we have a serious problem, especially with the greenhouse gas emissions. When you talk about global warming, there's air pollution, water pollution, so much depletion of natural resources. Talk about deforestation and also destruction of ecosystems. I mean, there's so much that you cannot actually exhaust. So in my conclusion, and what I can actually give in the interest of time, as my recommendation, you discover that Africa at large has a bigger role to play in the advancement of the world, because we have actually been dragged by lack of good leadership. There has been corruption. There has
Sorry, it appears we have lost Sharon Gitonga, but nonetheless, thank you so much for the submission, Sharon Gitonga. And all of us in the panel really seem to agree that much as there's this aspect of globalization, there's so much that needs to be done in terms of the interrelationship between Africa and the rest of the world in order for us to achieve this noble objective. At this particular time now, let me allow Kanyi Ndegwa. I understand he's been waiting really in the queue. Thereafter, once Kanyi Ndegwa is done, we'll be having Samuel Wairegi really to make his remarks. Kanyi Ndegwa, if you can hear me, please.
Yeah, I can hear you very clearly, sir.
Welcome, welcome.
Okay, thank you so much, the moderators, Miriam and Samuel, Dr. David Matsanga, my fellow panelists and viewers.
Sorry, is it possible for us to have your video, please? Could you unmute your video? Rather, we would like to see you.
Yeah, my video is unmuted. It is
but
unmuted.
I can't quite see you. I don't know what is the problem. Maybe you can take a minute or so as you arrange the same. Okay, I can now see you.
Speak now. You can
Go
see
ahead,
me now.
please. Thank you.
Yeah. So, globalization is, I think, a very wide topic. But in few words, globalization is as a result of realization that there is no country that can exist in isolation. So there is that need for the world countries to join hands on a communion of equal platform, whereby there can be exchange of multicultural ideas, whether for the facilitation of trade, education, and so many other aspects of life. In 1944, there came a realization that certain global institutions that would facilitate globalization were needed. So institutions such as the World Bank, the IMF, and even other the judicial institutions such as the ICC. Of course, ICC came later, the International Court of Justice. These are all institutions that are meant to facilitate globalization. But when you look at these institutions, even from the very composition, are they able to ensure global justice? Are they able to ensure that the human family is able to interact on an equal platform? So these are some of the challenges, because if you look at these institutions, even in terms of dispensation of global justice, you realize that some of them are so detached from the situation of Africa, such that the outcomes of their processes lead to even more problems than solutions to the African situation. The United Nations itself is the global legislator, or rather the global arbitrator, which is meant to ensure that there is equal playing field for all the countries and all the peoples of the world. But by its very composition and the manner in which it operates through the Security Council and all that, you realize that there are those permanent members, and then there is the tokenism of rotational membership that has been given to Africa. So we are actually, spectators in a game that we should be playing, right? So I'm reminded there is a book by Ngugi wa Thiong'o titled Moving the Center. In this book, the professor decries the subjugation of the African culture. It implores upon the world to decenter the world and take it back to the people, so that we depart from a situation whereby we are all, the world has been forced into one Western culture, when there are so many cultures of the world whereby people can operate on equal plane. But then when you look at the situation,
So we can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay, fine. Now I was talking about the way that the world has been forced into one Western culture, into one Western language, and that is what Professor Ngugi wa Thiong'o condemns and implores upon the world to realize that the world is made of so many cultures, whereby there can be a genuine cross-pollination of ideas, whereby we can learn from each other, as opposed to a situation where we are moving towards one culture. Now, when the problem of Africa in the global world was also really facilitated by the Cold War. Because during the Cold War, when there were two blocks, the Soviet and the capitalists, these blocks used to, if you are aligned to Russia, then Russia would support your regime, however brutal, however dictatorial, however corrupt. If you align yourself to the American side, then the Americans would support you, however brutal, however irresponsible you are, and however cruel you are to your people. So this is a situation that facilitated a very unfortunate misrule upon the African people, and the subjugation of systems that would facilitate good governance, human rights, and equality of the people. So let me state that in few words in my submission. I would say that Africa, in terms of globalization, and in terms of even the international summits where our leaders are invited and they make speeches, and then at the end of the day there's no action. It's just like a rabbit seated in the in a committee of lions discussing pastures and hunting tactics. So really, globalization has not worked for Africa the way it should be. That is why across the continent we are riddled with poverty, sickness, desperation, and bad governance. So I think more need to be done both at the global level and also at the national level amongst within Africa, because Africans themselves must also liberate themselves from the chains of dictatorship, corruption, and bad governance. I submit.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kanyi Ndegwa, for your submissions. I think at this particular moment now, just before I hand over to Miriam Ogutu, who is my co-moderator on this program, let me now allow Samuel Wairegi. As Samuel Wairegi comes in, please, Javan Karanja, also prepare to make your short remarks before I hand over to Miriam Ogutu. Wairegi, please.
Thank you very much for this opportunity that I have been given to just give a short presentation on this great topic of is Africa part of globalization? And for a fact, we must, and we have all agreed that Africa has been sidelined. We are not, and we are never among the ones sitting on the dining table. Of course, I would ask a question, how we expect ourselves to be part of the diners when we are the meal. We must choose where we belong. Africa is rich of resources, and we all know that. And on the dining table, these people discuss how they will exploit these resources. Africa shall continue to be part of the marginalized and playing out of the globalization field for another hundreds of years if we do not realize ourselves and support each other in this. Look at the case of Libya. That's just an example. They were lied, or the outsiders lied how our fellow Africans, how this President Muammar Gaddafi was bad, a dictator, a devil, and deserved death in exchange of democracy. Today, almost 10 years after his death, we have no peace, we have no democracy, nor do we have any positive result of this man's death. It's all wails and cries in that war-torn African countries. This is just one case of many countries that have undergone this. Once you try to uplift your head above the others, you are finished. Realizing ourselves means that we must also study history and enlighten others. This will equip us with knowledge, all of us as Africans, with knowledge to know where we are coming from and also know where we want to be in the future. Let me give an example of Kenya, our country. For the last 10 years, and to be more specific, the last 5 years when we got the handshake between our president and the former Prime Minister, Raila Amolo Odinga. We have seen a tremendous growth in our infrastructure and a positive division to our peace, development, and political maturity has enhanced good diplomacy between Kenya and other countries outside Africa. For this case, our president has represented Kenya and Africa at large in several G7 conferences and other important world making bodies. This is an achievement for Africa and to Kenyans, and a good step toward globalization and making Africa part of globalization. That's happening here. We have some politicians who want to take us back to old days of terrorism. We all know the effect of war. If we allow such leaders as Africans now at large to lead us, we will continue to our dignity, the dignity that we have spent time earning, and lose even what we have worked hard for and what we have become. Therefore, we must all unite, realize ourselves, help each other. We must also against bad leadership in Africa and those politicians, but because we are making a progress towards globalization when we see our presidents being called to participate in global world decision-making conferences. I submit. I submit.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. I think at this point, I will bring in the next panelist, and that will be Juliet Makapila, all the way from the UK. Juliet, if you're ready, you can proceed.
Wow. Where do I start and where do I begin? Let me first of all greet you from London here. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you and just listening to all of you. Thank you so much to Pan-African Forum UK, and of course, our beautiful legend, Dr. Matsanga, my mentor, and the work that you're doing around the globe for, especially to just bring in this discussion. And as we speak about
all right, sorry to interrupt you, Juliet, but if you could just to adjust your headroom, it's a bit too tight.
Can you see me?
Could you adjust your headroom? It's a little too tight. It's too close up.
Okay.
Yes.
Is that better?
I think. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Let me just move a little bit. I was a little bit doing other things, and so I just had to really come into this global is Africa part of photo. Sorry about that. Yeah, we've got loads of systems here in place, but thank you for that. Is that a little bit better, Mariam?
Are you able to move your device a bit far from your face, please?
Okay, I'm just gonna have to. Okay, let me just close that. Is that, and then I'll sort of like change my screenshot.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on, let me just try and, is that better?
Sure.
Yeah?
All right, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I do apologize about that. I'm not techie, but let me begin off by first of all appreciating this beautiful pre-conference a summit that is brought to you by Pan-African Forum UK and the work that you do. And of course, I have been following you a lot, the fight for freedom for African people around the world, the voices that you bring around, and to just bring in this Pre-Cop26 Glasgow summit, which is happening here in London. I do welcome you just to be part. And because I live in UK and I live in London, I am absolutely delighted that this summit is happening in Scotland. I am following it very, very closely. So thank you, Dr. Matsanga, for having me to be one of your speakers here today. I'm delighted to be joined with all the speakers. I've been listening carefully, and even those who've turned up and those who've not turned up. But I know that they will be giving feedback to Dr. Matsanga, and especially the ones on the flyer, Samuel Tanish, the moderator. Thank you, Professor Lumumba. Thank you. And Dr. Joseph Nyachama, Professor Jared, Professor David, every single one of you who has spoken here today, and especially to our youth and young people, because you're the youth for today and not just for tomorrow. So let me quickly wrap up because I know because of time. I've been asked to speak for 20 minutes. I'll try and sum it up in 5 minutes because of time. I'm going to start off by introducing myself. I'm the African Wonder Woman, and my name's Juliet Mahapila, and I reside in United Kingdom. And here I wear many hats. I love to introduce myself as love, because I believe that love is what is needed around the world. And I'm a social impactor. I'm a social scientist. I am also a community transformer. But I just love, if you'd like to know more about me, just find me on @JNM1000, and you can find a lot about me and the work that I do. I also wear the hat of politics. I'm also the diversity and inclusion diversity lead for Lib Dems here. And currently I'm standing to be the vice president here running that race. And I can tell you that it's an interesting journey. But let me start off by all the issues that you're talking about here today, especially within this topic that we've been asked to speak about, which is Africa part of globalization? What a question, our legend that you have put forward. And I want to ask us, how does Africa feel right now? You're hearing from the youth. You are hearing from the discussions here today about the barriers and implications that Africa are feeling. And just to hear the two last key speakers, I think the person, let me see the name who was speaking there, just a minute. I believe we had a young man who was addressing the issues and asking some of the great questions about where are we and who should really be leading the fight against the fight in climate issues. If you watch very carefully, I have put a link over there, and I'm going to start this topic with an event that I attended in Port Harcourt. Many of you know Port Harcourt, which is part of Nigeria. I believe it was about 6 to 7 years ago, and we met there just before the Paris Agreement, which was supposed to, which happened, and you know the history behind how issues are growing, especially when it comes to the Beijing call, which action platform, which was put in 1995. Let's start off from 7 years ago. But I also want us to take us back, right the way back from 1995, where we see the call of action for women. And you know the call of action for women will be resonating to all the things that you are speaking about here today. I'll bring you now back to the 6-7 years ago. Many of you might not know about it, but I was part of the persons who happened to have been in Port Harcourt at that time. And I was sitting amongst world leaders, I could tell you, and right in front of me, I understood the fight of the issues of social inequality, not just for Africa, but around Europe and the Western world. I was sitting with all types of presidents, former presidents, and current presidents around that time, and I happened to have spoken, and I happened to have been asked to speak about good leadership and also to speak about environment issues around that call. And that was just before they went to the Paris Agreement, which you then later saw came into France. By saying that, what really transpired? I'm going to speak about what really transpired. The call was to help us understand the very same topics that we are speaking about sort of today. But I tell you what, I observed and I seen the issues in real life. I had from Spain prime ministers. I was listening to how they have fought for their freedoms and rights in Spain, in Portugal, in Europe, and around the whole world. And that really allowed me to understand many of the issues that are happening around the world here today. Recently, you know that UK has also voted about, we have voted to come out of or to leave the EU, and you know how that politics is happening. So let me also summarize by saying, currently I'm a great supporter of we should not have left the EU, and especially when I'm wearing my political hat, I voted to stay in the EU because of all these issues that we are speaking about, because I felt that being a British and Kenyan citizen, I felt that that would help us to fight social inequality. But I can tell you that the politics behind that was really, really rough, and you can still see the impact that is causing us here, even as they do this summit right now. I'm sure they're going to be touching on Stop Brexit issues. So let's come back to the question that Dr. Matsanga has actually set up. Is Africa part of globalization? And I want to bring us back. Who should really be leading the call of the UN Climate Conference, UK 2021? And I want to bring it to our responsibilities back to Africa. Why do we always wait for other peoples to do other things for us? What is it that we lack in Africa? Why is it that our raw materials are always being brought everywhere and other people will create beneficiaries around us, as if we don't know or we are not intelligent enough to actually work for ourselves? And I want to bring the issues of honesty here and the issues around governance and bad management. And I can put a call here tonight on your behalf that we see time and time again. I want to talk about the SDG goal number 17, which is about collaboration, as many of you could understand those SDG goals. I want to also celebrate the issues of the UN and the impact that they have been doing. But we know the dilemma that these issues have been facing. Many of you have spoken about this here tonight, today, this afternoon, and I can tell you that even speaking about it here today, many of you, sometimes your hands are tied because you feel that you're attacked, and honesty sometimes can be really, really difficult. Let me talk about social inequality and how we should deal about social inequality when it comes around the world. I have produced a paper which I call Black Lib Dems, and I can tell you that that political paper needs to appreciate that Black Lives Matter, not just in United Kingdom here, but around the whole world. I want to make sure that
Black Lives Matter, because when we look at a nation and we don't appreciate certain communities, we are left behind. But I also want to put a question here today. Whose fault is it? Why is it that Black people's voices are not heard? And that's a very big question I want to leave here today. Why is it are we not able to fight for social inequality amongst ourselves? And let's look at our real economy ourselves. Are we able as sisterhoods and brotherhoods able to address the issues that we face even around Africa? What exactly happens in our country? Thank you, Pan-African Forum UK, for setting up this topic, because you present an opportunity for us to bring out to you what you should be taking to this summit. I want to finish off with saying that where we are right now, we are in the middle of a pandemic that is affecting the world here today, a pandemic that actually has also perhaps neglected our African people and Black people as a whole, a pandemic that has actually shown the real social inequality and where it really lies, a pandemic that has brought us at the forefront of what really needs to be doing, what we need to be doing, what is happening here in United Kingdom right now. As we go to these as we go to this UN, the UN summit right now. Let me go to their page and just quickly bring you to speed. So they say their topic is from 31st October to 12 November 2021, Glasgow Co-op 26, Glasgow COP 2016 in partnership with Italy. Very, very good. So let's talk about Italy. Where are we with Italy as a country as well? Is Italy really working with Africa? I would be asking. Uniting the world to tackle climate change. You've had so many things about what Africa wants. Is Africa really hard at the root of its problem? The UK will host the 26th UK climate conference, and I would like to say that this is meant to bring in the action towards the goals of Paris Agreement and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Issues. The UK is committed to working with all the countries and joining forces with civil society. My question is, recently cut the foreign aid, and I want to ask, if the foreign aid for UK has just been cut for Africa, how will that be helping Africa? So as you go there, Dr. Matsanga, I send you with a message. We want the foreign aid to be put back so that the foreign aid can help Africa. After all, that foreign aid needed to be increased, not needed to be removed. As I leave you here today, I want to celebrate all the diaspora. The diaspora has been keeping in existence all our remittance that are sent back across Africa, not just in Kenya, but you will have seen that the diaspora remittance is what has kept us going. So I want to just celebrate every diasporian, because by you supporting the diasporians, I want them to be brought at the forefront of such summits, because we become the ambassadors and people who can bridge the gap of our nations. I want to leave you with that here today, but I'm grateful that we're having such conversation. I'm grateful to see James here and every single person who has come in. Thank you so much, Marian, for the work that you do, because without you and the support that you give to all the students around the world, I'm sorry my technical issues here were here today, and I've been waiting behind the scenes, and I was in another meeting before I came in. But I'll leave you with something. Help us. When Africa learns to appreciate the diaspora, whichever part of the world that we are living, that is the day we are also going to be able to fight these UN climate issues. You can imagine we sit here in UK and many of us are not involved in these political talks of climate issues. If you can't involve Black people when we live here, then you go from our own countries here and you go to Africa. What do you expect? Do you expect to see change? So these conversations will carry on. I will leave you with that, but I thank you all. I want us to invest. We can invest in ourselves. We can create those investments. The diaspora, there is big room for you to see that the diaspora can actually cover those those gaps that are missing. Social inequality, systemic, institutional, we call it here, institutional systemic racism. All those issues that you're talking about, I talk about it every day. I'm at the heart of it. I'm at the forefront of championing the issues of Africans and Caribbean. I'm also the Black Lib Dem founder, so you're glad to know that. But I just want to leave you with one thing here today. If we are going to be part of the UN global climate issues, Africa has got to be heard. Africa is the place for everything that is happening right now around the world. We are the people who have been giving resources to the rest of the world. And until Africa understands its own people, until Africa respects its own people, until Africa loves its own people, because when you don't love your people, what you do is you create poverty. When you don't love your people, what you do, you don't have good hospital. When you don't love your people, what you do is those people are suffering. When you don't respect those people, it means even us here, as a Black race living abroad, we face institutional racism. Until when Africa will start respecting its nation, we are then not going to make laws of progress. I want to leave you and plead with our presidents as they go into that high table. I want them to be ambassadors, not just for themselves, but to be ambassadors for the grassroots and the nations that they are meant to represent. I leave you with that here today. I have rushed it, but if any of you would like to have these conversations here today, you can always contact me on +44 77423 84052. And for the youth, I want you to be the youth for today. I want you to build a better world. I want you to understand that climate issues are real. I want you to make sure that we don't make the same mistakes that the West has made, but we actually glorify and make sure that Africa has learned from the past issues that have happened in other countries. We stand a great chance. That is why we are unique. We stand a good chance because we can look at what works best and what does not work best. We will actually live it. Back to you. I submit, and thank you for having me here today. African Wonder Woman. Thank you.
Thank you so much. African Wonder Woman, Juliet Makapila there, all the way from the UK. At this point, I'd like to take us back to Dr. David Matsanga because I think those who are supposed to speak have spoken, and so perhaps he could give us his final remarks and close the show for us today, the conference for us today. Doc.
I don't know whether my friend from the News Central, you would like to say a word, but I believe William Mwika, do you want to say any word? Okay. Miriam. Mr. James Gichemo, do you want to say any word?
Dr. Matsanga, I just invited a few people, so they were joining late, but I think they saw my flyer late. But I just wanted to say, anybody who would like to follow the kind of conversations that you're bringing in, when it comes to UK matters, with institutional racism, that is real, not just in UK, but it's also real around Europe. And we need to solve Africa's problems, the root cause of the problem. Our people have to do better. Our people have to respect our nations. When you respect our nations, our job becomes easier in the corridor and in the power of corridor here. As we stand, we have so many councillors who are trying to go to positions, but we are not able to do that job when the head of states are not supporting us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juliet, for your speech. Thank you very much. Anybody else who has something to say before I close down? Yes, James, I have been calling you, but you are not. Unmute. Unmute you all. Unmute Dave. Yeah. Unmute. You have muted. Unmute.
Hang on.
Yes. Hello? Yes.
Oh, sorry. I do apologize because I'm working. I've just in a short time to you because I'm in the car now. Sorry about that. I would like to say something very important because we people, we inherited a world from our forefathers, which was very, very fair. No pollution. The environment was very clean. And then due to our industrial and commercial activities and greed, our pollution, the environment became polluted. What we got to do now for our children and our children's children is to do something now that will go down in history. Because if we don't do something now, history will judge us very harsh. Our children and future generation will be asking, with all the technology, why did they not do anything? So, with all the education and technology we got, I believe it's possible to do something today to sort out the mess that is being created in our environment due to greed and the high level of industrialization, which we witness today. Just the other day, I read that the ozone layer that covers us and shields us from the harmful rays is being depleted very quick. So very harmful rays are coming to us now that will cause cancers and other things. So it's very imperative and vital and evolve everybody, the government, the social society, the youth, and professionals towards this common endeavor, which is a noble activity, which we cannot afford to lose. We cannot see things going wrong with our hearts in a pocket without doing anything. Myself, as an engineer, I know what normally goes on as far as pollution, industrialization is concerned. I thank very much the forum organizers because of bringing about this very sensitive issue that will matter too much for us and for future generations to come. Thank you very much. You got our support, and we acknowledge this undertaking, which is very vital as we continue to live in the 21st century through the digital age. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James Gichuri, for leaving your work and, stopping your car somewhere and saying, yes, you have got to pass. Thank you very much. Very few people in the world don't realize the importance of why I have decided.
There's a noble cause, which is building on it.
We must shout ourselves out. This world is becoming very funny. The ozone layer, everywhere you go, there is no oxygen. Things are, we shall reach a point when the oceans will come and overtake us, drown us. Things are changing. Therefore, we must advocate for bringing back out our ecosystems, bring them together, our environment. But if there are people who are making double standards, China, for example, is the biggest polluter in the world, and the United States of America. They are producing everything up to the nuts that are used to roll the computers and so on. This is all pollution, and it is going to affect us today, tomorrow, and the next generation. Thank you very much, James, for being a good follower, and God bless you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, man.
Okay, thank you, Engineer James. Ladies and gentlemen, Shakespeare says the world is a stage where you come, you play, and they leave the stage for others. It has been a very good morning. Although we started late, I want to apologize to a few people because of the technical hitches that we had in London. It is sad that therefore we have reached the point where we have to say bye-bye to each other. But the platform remains the people's platform. Punchline Africa TV remains your platform. Pan-African Forum remains your platform. I have never shied from saying from AU, African Union, how it has died, how it collapsed, how it went wrong, while things are going wrong in Africa, I've said about ICC, how it is bad, how it will be bad, how it will destroy Africa. I've said about international agencies that Africans should run away very fast from. Yeah. I don't fear controversy. I want anybody to try me. I'm ready to be tried. And we can have a runner for Yemen, for anything. First, I have the knowledge. 2, I have the tools of analysis. 3, I have the exposure to deal with anybody who touches Africa. Africa is me. Africa is Matsanga. Africa is the soul. Africa is my food. I want an Africa that stands, speaks against evil in a united format, calling us to Glasgow, summarizing for us what we should do when you are the ones coming to take our diamonds and causing environmental catastrophe. Is there a factory in Africa that manufactures gold rings? Show me one country in Africa. Sharon Gitonga, do you have the ring that you have on your finger? Where was it manufactured? Do you know where it was manufactured from? It is diamond bought from Botswana, sent to Europe in Antwerp for them to be manufactured. Then you wear the ring. No African nation is making diamond rings, and yet we are the producers of diamonds across the globe. Viewers, today's issue highlights several problems in years on difficulties. From vaccine, it means, it shows to me in summary, Miriam and Samuel Tawish. To me, it brings me to disclosure, to closing point to say, I think we are spectators of the global market. We shall remain spectators, I agree. Because look, if COVID insisted further, how many millions of people in Africa have been vaccinated? So long as you don't talk. How many people in Africa have been vaccinated? All of you here listening to me, how many people in your country have been vaccinated? Abigail, how many people in Zimbabwe have been vaccinated? Even if we don't meet. So look at that. Look at that. Not everybody in Kenya is vaccinated. We have managed just to vaccinate less than 5 million people. But the whole of Europe, 90% of Europeans, 95% are vaccinated. So after the vaccination is when they gave us what was left, You see each country running up to say, I will surrender my doors. It's a good gesture of a Bible that share with your neighbor what you have. But we should be put on the first lane. Also to be given these medicines sufficiently in time in order to heal ourselves. I submit. I want to take the opportunity to thank all of you. Miriam, I don't know where you are. I want to see your face to say bye-bye to you. Miriam, oh, Miriam, thank you very much for hosting this show. Tawish, I want to see your face. All of you can put on your cameras and we see each other's faces. Yes, Omuse, Tawish, Legacy Trend, put on your camera. Kanyi Dengwa, my new lawyer, please, that is the way to go. Wakili, don't leave that point anytime, anywhere. Market the shores. This is the place where you should always be.
Sure.
From Zimbabwe, don't leave. My brother from the News Center, thank you very much for all that you have done today. You have covered enough of what you have shown to the world, what we have done. I want to thank you all. Juliet Mahapira from Central London in London, thank you very much. I will be proceeding to Scotland sometime tomorrow or Sunday. Miriam, I see you again on Sunday, 2 p.m. East African Standard Time, which will be about 12 noon London time or Scotland time. I will broadcast live from there. Asante sana, asante, and asante sana. Mungu awabariki. I understand why Guru has been arrested, that he has discovered his angels in the hell, where hell was. So bye-bye. That's a very good weekend with Kamata. God bless you.
Now, God bless you, Dr. Matsanga. Please bring us right to
Cornelius, say thank you very much, all of you, and God bless you. Asante.
Peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.